Godzilla. Just hearing that name takes me back to when I was a kid, watching the old Toho monster movies with my father every Sunday afternoon. My father even recorded Godzilla 1985 for me off the TV, which was preceded by Bambi Meets Godzilla. So anytime I wanted to watch Godzilla stomp his way all over Tokyo, I got to see him squash Bambi first. During the 90s, it became a lot harder to find Godzilla movies. We had this little Japanese kiosk in the mall that sold all these bootleg anime and Japanese movies, and this became the only way we could see some of these films. Sure, they may have been in Japanese with no subtitles, but it didn't really matter. All we cared about was watching Godzilla use his atomic breath on Mecha King Ghidorah. In 1997, when my father and I went to see Men in Black at the theater, something pretty amazing happened. A trailer opened at a museum where kids were learning about dinosaurs. However, once we started to hear what sounded like giant footsteps, we both looked at each other because we knew exactly what was coming. I could not have been more excited. A new Godzilla movie? An American Godzilla movie? Not in my wildest dreams could I have imagined a new Godzilla movie coming to theaters, especially not one made outside of Japan. Once the trailers dropped, the marketing campaign went into full swing. I swear you couldn't watch anything without being bombarded by the Size Does Matter ad campaign, even if the adult jokes sort of went over my head. Even though they were doing everything to hype this movie up, they never really gave us a good look at what Godzilla would actually look like. Toys and merchandise were held off until the release of the film to keep everything a surprise, though Taco Bell didn't seem to get the memo because they had no problem plastering Godzilla all over their stuff. The best part of this whole Godzilla renaissance was it felt like something I had always loved was now part of the cultural zeitgeist. I swear I was the only kid in my class who loved Godzilla, but now it felt like everyone loved Godzilla. For the first time, it felt like the thing I loved was suddenly everywhere, and deep down I was absolutely convinced this was going to be the best movie ever. Prior to Godzilla stomping its way into theaters, Hollywood had actually been trying to Americanize Godzilla for years. And honestly, almost every attempt seemed to begin with the exact same idea. What if we made Godzilla, but removed everything people liked about Godzilla? Back in 1983, Steve Miner, director of Friday the 13th Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 3, pitched an American production called Godzilla King of the Monsters in 3D, which honestly sounds less like a movie title and more like a monster truck rally. Miner approached Toho with the idea of making a massive big-budget American Godzilla film, starring actual Hollywood actors, which at the time was kind of a huge deal for a movie like this. To write the screenplay, he hired Fred Decker, known for The Monster Squad, and eventually RoboCop 3. Now here's where things start getting weird. Decker openly admitted he wasn't really a Godzilla fan and thought the whole concept was cheesy, which is always exactly who you want writing your Godzilla movie, though oddly enough even Steve Miner himself had a pretty strange take on the original film, once saying, "I had always been a fan of Godzilla since I was a kid. Once seeing it as an adult, I realized that this could be remade as a good movie." Wait, so he's saying the original Godzilla isn't a good movie? Because sure, the effects are dated, but the original film is still amazing, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Miner's version would have featured Godzilla traveling to San Francisco in search of its missing offspring, which honestly sounds suspiciously close to the plot of Gorgo. Still, the project actually had some incredible talent attached. Artist William Stout created storyboards and concept art, stop-motion legend David W. Allen began effects work, and Rick Baker was even set to handle animatronic close-up effects for Godzilla itself. Unfortunately, the project collapsed under its massive budget, along with concerns that Steve Miner simply wasn't a big enough director to justify the cost, which is funny considering nowadays you can direct a $300 million superhero movie after making 2 episodes of television and a yogurt commercial. But Hollywood wasn't done trying to reinvent Godzilla just yet. In 1992, Sony Tri-Star struck a deal with Toho to produce a big-budget American Godzilla trilogy. This new version was supposedly going to stay true to the spirit of the character, once again tying Godzilla to nuclear destruction and atomic weaponry. Toho even sent over a list of rules explaining what could and could not be done with the character. Some of these included: Godzilla must be created by nuclear testing. Godzilla must have 3 rows of dorsal fins. Godzilla cannot eat people. And perhaps most importantly, Godzilla cannot die. Cannot die.
Die.
So naturally, Hollywood immediately ignored half of these. Tri-Star began hearing pitches from seemingly every filmmaker in existence. At various points, ideas came from Tim Burton, Clive Barker, the writers of Predator, and apparently anyone else who happened to wander past the studio lot that afternoon. Eventually, writers Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio came aboard. Now, unlike some of the earlier creatives attached to the project, these two actually tried to make something that still resembled a Godzilla movie. Their version featured Godzilla as an ancient protector, battling an alien-created monster called the Griffin, which sounds really stupid but also kind of awesome. Eventually, director Jan de Bont, fresh off Speed and Twister, signed on to the project, and this is where things get a little painful, because de Bont's version had Stan Winston handling creature effects. The Griffin monster alone looked more threatening than half the creatures in modern blockbuster movies, but once the budget ballooned past $100 million, Tri-Star panicked and the whole thing collapsed. Again. Which finally brings us to Roland Emmerich, a man who had previously turned down directing Godzilla because he thought the whole concept was dopey. Which once again raises the question, why does every person hired to make this movie seem to hate Godzilla? Still, Emmerich and producer Dean Devlin eventually agreed to take on the project under one condition: they would completely reinvent the character.
My whole concept was based on totally changing Godzilla.
Gone was the upright, radioactive force of destruction. Gone was the pissed off personality, and gone was the atomic breath. Instead, Godzilla became a giant mutated iguana that runs away from helicopters. Apparently, when Emmerich showed Toho the new design, the executives were left stunned. However, Emmerich reportedly gave them an ultimatum: we either do it like this, or we don't do it at all. Toho really didn't have much to lose at that point. They still retained ownership of the character, and could continue making their own films regardless of what happened in America. So they agreed. Meanwhile, Emmerich and Devlin took Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio's screenplay and promptly tossed it in the trash. The only thing retained from the original Godzilla was its atomic origins. Everything else had been stripped away so Emmerich and Devlin could create the movie they wanted, not the movie Godzilla fans wanted. And you know, it always works out really well when you deliberately ignore the fans. So with all that history and a creative team that doesn't even seem to like Godzilla, just how good or bad was Godzilla? The movie opens with nuclear testing in French Polynesia. Now it goes through a montage of various reptiles, none of which can actually be found in French Polynesia, but we are led to believe that one of these reptile eggs somehow birthed a massive iguana monster and didn't just get cooked by the radiation. It then cuts to a Japanese cannery ship because I guess since this movie takes place mostly in New York, they had to get Godzilla attacking the Japanese in there somehow, but this whole sequence is actually pretty great. Godzilla doing Godzilla things, from the claws going through the ship to the awesome tail whip. It's exactly what you'd want from a Godzilla movie. Though as someone who's terrified of the water and whatever might be lurking in it, if I saw something that massive on the sonar heading towards the ship, I'd probably just commit Jisatsu. However, after this fun opening, the movie comes to a screeching halt.
What a glorious feeling, I'm a happier child.
I don't know who thought it was a good idea to give Matthew Broderick a driver's license. Matthew Broderick plays Dr. Nick Tatopoulos, and no, I'm not going to do it. Fine.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Nick is a biologist who's studying the effects of radiation on earthworms, which, as someone who used to fish all the time, this is a gold mine of bait. The US State Department informs Nick that he's being reassigned because they have something of a Godzilla problem. Also, we get one of the most annoying running gags in the movie, with characters not being able to pronounce a name that is actually pretty easy to say.
Dr. Nico Topopoulos. Dr. Nico Topopoulos.
How did Mrs. Tadopoulos handle that?
Research team member Dr. Nick Papadopoulos.
It's Totopoulos.
Nick is actually named after Patrick Totopoulos, special effects supervisor and the man responsible for Godzilla's design. I guess Roland Emmerich thought his name was so funny that this had to be a running gag. We're then introduced to Jean Reno's character Philippe Roche, a French intelligence operative sent to clean up France's mistake. You see, we can't have the United States be responsible for the creation of Godzilla in an American Godzilla movie, though I think it would be kind of poetic if the bombs dropped on Japan created a monster that wanted revenge on the United States. Now imagine if that Godzilla was in New York. Now if you thought Matthew Broderick's character was a wet fart, just wait until you meet his love interest and true villain of the movie, Audrey Timmons. Audrey's a wannabe reporter and assistant to Charles Kamen, the Harvey Weinstein of Godzilla films.
Mr. Kamen, you're married.
Yes, and you're very beautiful. Have I ever told you that before?
Mr. Kamen?
If you're wondering, yes, that's Harry Shearer, the voice of Kent Brockman on The Simpsons. But do you think he's named Cayman because caiman are a type of reptile? And for some reason, there are other Simpsons actors also in the movie. Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson, appears in a cameo alongside Barney the dinosaur. And Hank Azaria, the voice of characters like Mo and Apu, plays a cameraman named Victor Animal Pilati. And you know what? He's actually the best character if I'm being honest. Most of them range from boring to evil, but Victor just feels like your average New Yorker. Like the scene with the Japanese ship, the scene with the fishing boats is one of the highlights of the movie. Just the fact that something so large could easily drag under a few boats is actually kind of terrifying. I even love the fake out when the boats pop back out of the water. They make you believe for a split second it's Godzilla, but this movie isn't quite ready to show him off. Anywho, in New York City, the city that never stops raining because they need to hide dodgy CGI, Audrey sees Nick on TV and it turns out the two were college sweethearts. And I'm sure they won't somehow reconnect while a giant monster is ravaging the city. The next 5 minutes might be the best part of the movie. An old fisherman gets the bite of his life when he somehow hooks Godzilla. This scene was also used in some of the teaser trailers for the movie, though they removed the part with the eye. But from here it really is the giant monster mayhem you'd expect in a movie like this. Emmerich, who is something of a petty man, named the mayor of New York, Mayor Ebert, and his aide, Gene, a not-so-subtle jab at critics Siskel and Ebert, who weren't exactly a fan of his films.
A mixed review, but thumbs down from me.
Same kind of thumbs down for me, too.
Yeah.
When Siskel and Ebert saw their inclusion in the movie, they weren't exactly happy, though Ebert felt that if they're gonna be in the movie, then they should have been killed off.
Yeah, maybe they should have included that.
Again,
bring him on stage, at least squish him, right?
Despite some of the boring scenes with characters no one likes, the first 30 minutes are actually pretty well done. It sets up how Godzilla was created, gives a few brief scenes of destruction, and a nice little stroll through New York. The pace here is rather quick and keeps the film moving along. However, after this, for some reason, everything just sort of drags. I don't know what it is, but the movie just comes to a crawl. It becomes about finding Godzilla and figuring out what to do with it. Now you might be asking yourself, what do you mean find Godzilla? How do you lose something that big?
After its initial attack, he disappeared.
Well, despite being larger than the average building in New York, he's somehow able to hide himself inside the surrounding subway tunnels. Even if it does burrow underground, New York isn't that big. Yet the film treats Manhattan like the giant hedge maze from The Shining. Their plan to find Godzilla is to lure him out using thousands and thousands of fish.
That's a lot of fish.
Godzilla finally makes his full on-screen appearance, looking like the love child of Robert Zadar and Bruce Campbell. The thing about this Godzilla when compared to the classic Godzilla is it feels more like an animal than a force of destruction. I mean, it almost feels friendly before the military starts to attack it. Honestly, I think it was just looking for something to eat. First it attacked the Japanese cannery looking for food, then the fishing boats, and then when it came to New York, the first thing it did was head to the fish market. It wasn't exactly exactly trying to destroy the city. It just did so because it's a lumbering iguana monster and doesn't actually understand how big it is. It's kind of like Clifford the Big Red Dog. However, as destructive as Godzilla is, the military does way more damage. Sure, Godzilla may smash a building or two, but the army can't seem to hit the broadside of a barn. Every time they try to shoot the monster, they're taking out some historic building instead. Now, the army in the old school Godzilla films may have been incompetent as well, but I think these guys take it to the next level. I mean, even when Godzilla is swimming underwater, they can't help but kill their own men. Also, unlike the traditional Godzilla, this one has a tendency to run instead of fight. I get Emmerich and Devlin were trying to make a sleeker and faster Godzilla. I mean, it was the 90s, everything had to be edgier and faster, but Godzilla is supposed to treat us like we're ants, a mere nuisance that for the most part he can ignore, and at worst blast us away with his atomic breath. And, the atomic breath? Yeah, this Godzilla doesn't have an atomic breath. No, instead, he has what Emmerich and Devlin call power breath. And I would have power breath too if I ate that much raw fish. Making Godzilla run and taking away his atomic breath would be like taking away Superman's ability to fly or withstand bullets. Actually, because Godzilla didn't have his trademark atomic breath in this movie, it actually gave me PTSD when it came time to see the 2014 version. The whole time in theater, I kept having flashbacks thinking Godzilla's not gonna have his atomic breath. Thankfully, those fears were put aside when he blasted those mutos in the face, but for a while there, I was really nervous. After the first major encounter with the monster, Nick has a run-in with a monster of his own, his ex-girlfriend Audrey. Back when they were an item, she ghosted him after he asked her to marry him, because she wanted to be a journalist instead. Don't know why you can't do both. Now this is a pretty shitty thing to do to someone after 4 years of a relationship, but to make things even worse, she steals a tape labeled Top Secret from him in an attempt to further her own career. Although seriously, why are there tapes labeled Top Secret just laying around everywhere? Hilariously, her boss steals her report, which gets her nowhere, and Nick loses his position on the project because they believe he leaked the tape to the press. So she screwed over Nick multiple times, but I wonder how she feels about it.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
While all this went down, Nick also discovered that Godzilla is pregnant and is likely looking for some place to nest. Nick gets, I guess, kidnapped by Philippe on his way to the airport because, as he explains, he's part of the French Secret Service and they are there to clean up their own mess, which is very unusual of the French because they generally just wave tiny white flags. Meanwhile, Animal reports back to Audrey and tells her what Nick is up to, though honestly, she just seems to be more upset that her career is dead. Now, they've all decided to go underground to find Godzilla's nest, but here's my question. A 180-foot monster is digging massive tunnels all over Manhattan? Would that not cause gigantic sinkholes all over the city?
Well, there's so many holes in First Avenue, we really didn't think anyone would notice.
The military decides to try their fish trick again, since that worked out so well the first time. One thing I will give the movie credit for is they don't rely entirely on CGI. There are actually some animatronic Godzilla puppets used throughout the film, and when blended together with the wider CGI shots, sometimes it genuinely works. Sometimes. But Godzilla ain't no fool, because he immediately realizes this is a setup. How the hell do this many helicopters even fit into such a tiny space? They're practically on top of each other firing machine guns. The amount of friendly fire during this operation must be staggering. Godzilla escapes by diving into the Hudson River, which for a creature roughly 180 feet tall, in a river averaging around 30 feet deep, would be like me diving into a child's blow-up pool. The military was prepared for this as they had submarines waiting in the water, the again 30 feet of water. They do actually manage to hit and kill Godzilla, which is kind of anticlimactic. So with Godzilla dead, all that's left is taking care of the babies, which should be easy enough.
I thought there'd be more.
And you were right.
There's gotta be more than 20 eggs here. Oh, way more.
Godzilla somehow laid a couple hundred eggs inside Madison Square Garden, though I don't know how it managed this without completely destroying the building. When the eggs start to hatch, it's quite obvious that the baby Godzillas are just rip-offs of the raptors from Jurassic Park. Hey, ripping off Jurassic Park was the style at the time. Even Tremors 2 ripped off the raptors with their shriekers. I will say the baby Godzillas don't look half bad, especially the animatronic ones. I mean, they could have looked a hell of a lot worse.
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles, you know.
Then while the babies are busy eating all the French soldiers who aren't Philippe, Audrey and Animal get cornered, and one of the baby Godzillas lets out a sound that is 100% identical to the imp death sound from the original Doom game. Inexplicably, all the main characters just somehow group up together and plan to broadcast directly from the building, with the hopes the military will see the broadcast.
You see that, Ed? They're gonna be all over the city if we don't stop them.
This shot brought to you by Sprint. Oh, in this one, Blockbuster. The heroes manage to broadcast their message, which is quickly picked up by the military. The military gives them 6 minutes to get out before they bomb the building. And like in any typical Hollywood film, they manage to escape only moments before the place explodes. While it's fun to see Madison Square Garden explode, it's not exactly on the same level as the White House in Independence Day. Why didn't any of the baby Godzillas leave through the massive tunnel that our characters entered through? You're telling me that a few of them didn't just randomly leave in search of food? One of the biggest issues with this movie is the length and pacing. By this point in the movie, we're at the 1 hour and 52 minute mark, and yet we still have roughly another 17 minutes to go. And I know you're asking yourself, how can there be another 17 minutes when the monsters are all dead? Well, that's because Godzilla isn't. It's strange because the ending with the baby Godzillas feels like the true end of the movie. You could say they were trying to subvert expectations, but it's handled in such a way that it has this weird start and stop effect. I feel like Emmerich and Devlin realized that people came expecting a giant monster movie, so you have to end on your giant monster. What we get now is a chase from a very angry Godzilla. For most of the movie, Godzilla actually seemed fairly harmless. Yes, it was causing unwanted destruction, but it was mostly just looking for food because it was pregnant. Now though, seeing its babies dead on the ground, Godzilla is straight up vindictive. The same thing happens in Godzilla 2014 with the Mutos and their babies. Once they realized a human killed their offspring, they went right for the person that did it. However, for our heroes in this movie, they don't have another giant monster to protect them, so I have no idea how they're able to outrun Godzilla. The movie then blatantly rips off Jurassic Park again with a scene that mirrors the T-Rex chase scene. But it's funny, the original teaser trailer came out the same year as The Lost World, and the entire point of it was to show how much bigger and better their monster is than the old outdated dinosaurs from Jurassic Park. Yet at the same time, they have so few ideas of their own that they have to steal from Jurassic Park anyways. Not only did they steal from Jurassic Park, but the movie is more of a remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms than it is Godzilla. Which is funny because The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms would be responsible for directly inspiring the creation of the original Godzilla. It seems like everything just came full circle for this one. Our heroes continue evading a giant monster that was fast enough to outrun helicopters until they get cornered in a tunnel that Godzilla seems to have trouble entering despite burrowing all throughout New York for the entire movie. For some reason, they're able to escape using the high beams on their stolen taxi. I thought this was supposed to be Godzilla, not Gremlins.
No. He hates bright lights.
Our intrepid group of idiots lead the monster to the Brooklyn Bridge, where they somehow end up inside its mouth. The most baffling part is how they're able to survive. You're telling me Godzilla can't crush a taxi because it has a chunk of the bridge in its mouth? Even as a kid, I thought this made no sense. They managed to escape by electrocuting his gums and driving out of his mouth. Meanwhile, Toho Godzilla gets struck by lightning and gets even stronger. The group manages to lure Godzilla onto the Brooklyn Bridge, where it gets tangled in the cables and, like a caged animal, is finally put down by the military. And honestly, despite how goofy this movie can be, the ending is actually kind of depressing. This Godzilla really didn't do anything wrong outside of merely existing. They even try to mirror the ending of the King Kong remake by making the scene quiet and somber between the monster and the lead character. But then everyone starts cheering and Puff Daddy immediately kicks in. this Godzilla wasn't the atomic rage monster from the 1950s. It was basically just an animal looking for somewhere to nest, a creature doing what came naturally to it. The only reason it seemed destructive was because of its size. If this thing were normal size, nobody would even think twice about it. And honestly, I think Ishiro Honda, director of the original Godzilla, described these monsters best when he said, "Monsters are tragic beings. They are born too tall, too strong, too heavy. They are not evil by choice. That is their tragedy." While this Godzilla is not the force of destruction that the original Godzilla is, I'd argue that it might be even more devastating. Had Godzilla laid its eggs somewhere remote, just imagine what could have happened. Hundreds of Godzillas spreading across the world, devouring everything in the sea, devouring everything on land. The world's militaries might be able to kill a few, but at the rate they reproduce, and the fact they are all born pregnant, it would be an ecological apocalypse. They would quickly become the dominant species, but in a way that would be so devastating that life on Earth would cease to exist, including themselves. This is actually kind of similar to what could have happened in 2016's Shin Godzilla. In that movie, Godzilla evolved into many different forms. However, at the end of the movie, when the monster is defeated, we are briefly shown what looks like a new evolution. These bizarre humanoid Godzilla creatures. It's actually one of the creepiest concepts the series has ever put out there, but probably the only one that would rival this version in terms of apocalyptic scale. Godzilla would end on some sequel bait as they were planning this out to be a trilogy. The next film would feature Godzilla actually fighting another monster. Wow, what a novel concept. A giant insect queen who in one treatment was named Queen Bitch. I would have paid so much money to see Godzilla vs. Queen Bitch. However, because of critical reception, low box office, and an even larger budget, the sequel never happened. The movie would continue, however, in Godzilla the Series, a cartoon which would bring back all the characters and turn Nick into Godzilla Jr.'s pseudo-parent. So basically, it's like he has a 180-foot duckling by his side, which actually fights monsters and has its atomic breath. In 2004, the American Godzilla would return for Godzilla's 50th anniversary in Godzilla Final Wars. However, since acquiring the American version, Final Wars producer Shogo Tomiyama decided to rename the monster to Zilla, because the Americans took the god out of Godzilla. It was just Toho's way of taking their monster back and showing Americans what they thought of their version. Now this might surprise you, but I don't hate this movie. I actually kind of enjoy it. Sure, I might be blinded by nostalgia because I own the toys, the album, the VHS, and the Taco Bell merch, but I'm a sucker for silly monster movies. It might not make sense at times, the characters may be dull, the effects kind of wonky, and it's too long, but I like the design of Godzilla, and in my mind, I just treat it like any cheesy monster movie. The only thing I'll say is it's a product of its time. It basically encapsulates everything that is awesome and silly about the 90s. And for that, I recommend it. But what say you? What do you think about Godzilla 98? Do you like it? Hate it? This one should be interesting because it is very divisive. Anyways, that is all for today. Thank you so much for getting me to 17K and stay spooky. Huge thanks to all my channel members, you're the real MVPs of the Spooky Squad. Your support helps keep the lights flickering and the monsters fed. If you'd like to join up and help support the channel, check out the join button below. But no pressure, just watching and liking helps a ton too.